we've got some dedicated teachers that are just awesome. Now, I am a little biased because my wife's a teacher, but if there's a teacher in here, either current or former, we love you and really are grateful for what you do. So, if you look, Texas is known for its graduation rates. We have very high graduation rates. We rank pretty high, and really it's across all demographics, which is good. And we also, really more relevant to our districts here, the Collin County and Denton school districts, we are blessed. We have very good school districts in Collin and Denton. So we have a significant number of our students that are actually on the AP courses and getting prepared for college. In fact, Frisco ISD has a program where when a student graduates from high school, they can actually enter the University of North Texas as a junior. So that's pretty important if you think about economic development. The other thing I tell our teachers is they are actually the ones that are the economic drivers of the state of Texas. There's 1,000 people that move to Texas every day. We have lots of corporations coming, and it's because of our workforce. And our teachers are the ones that are building that workforce. But doing innovative things like that is really pretty substantial. We have some great statistics around blue ribbon schools, national merits, all that types of stuff. So these are statewide numbers. Our school districts here locally, again, Denton and Collin, are even better. I mean, we have some school districts that literally have 100% graduation rates. The children in our areas are really well prepared for college, the workforce, military. The challenge we have is there's some pockets of Texas, either in our urban areas or our rural areas, where the performance of our schools aren't so good. And the challenge that we have as a state is those are the populations that are actually growing the fastest. So we've got to address those. As you can imagine, there's some challenges with some of our rural schools. We think virtual education will play a role with that. We're making some big investments in broadband, those types of things. So we're addressing those. And then you can see the funding, total funding for schools. It's actually increased by $20 billion over the past 8 years. So we've increased overall funding and then the per student funding for a number of years. You can go to the next slide. So some of the increases from last session, 2019 was really a substantial year of funding increases. It was about $13 billion. $5 billion was to address Robin Hood. So if you're a recapture school, especially if you're Plano ISD, this is a very sore subject. Plano ISD, for example, gives over $200 million of local property taxes, gives it to the state, and then distributes it out. The funding formulas, there's some good things about our funding formulas, and there's some really bad things about our funding formulas. Robin Hood is a really bad thing. It was created about 3 decades ago, and Robin Hood, or recapture, whatever you want to call it, but it's taking local dollars and distributing it out statewide. It was created, like I said, about 3 decades ago, and it was really meant for the mineral-rich school districts, like maybe a dozen. And that, as you know, you're probably painfully aware, our property values have gone up exponentially. So the way those formulas work, it now impacts a significant number of ISDs. And me and a group of legislators that are on the giving side of Robin Hood, we've been fighting Robin Hood for years. The problem always was, if you look at the body of the legislature, you look at the makeup of the legislature, you had more legislators that are on the receiving side than on the giving side. So guess how those discussions went? So when Houston actually became a contributor, a Robin Hood contributor, those dynamics changed. So we're going to continue to work on Robin Hood. We put $5 billion towards Robin Hood. Last session, we've had $5 billion for property tax relief, and we were able to maintain that funding last session, which is really good. A lot of states had to cut education funding. We actually did a little bit of an increase in education funding. COVID. I hope I make our timeline. When are we supposed to leave? 10:30? All right, I'm not doing very well. I'll try to speed up. So COVID is a big challenge. We have a significant amount of dollars that we're going to allocate for the recovery of COVID. Obviously, the shutdowns, we have children learning virtually. What's happened, if you compare Texas nationwide to the COVID shutdowns and the results, we can say we didn't do quite as bad. So the gap as far as where children are where they should be because of COVID. If you compare Texas to other states, we're not quite as bad. So if you look at, for example, math, 4th grade math, 8th grade math, the state is actually doing pretty well, but our scores still fell. So 4th grade math, we rank like number 14th in the nation out of 50 or 51. I don't know if they count Washington DC or not. 8th grade math, we're right at the middle at 25th, the ranking. English, we're way behind. Now, if you look at the demographics of Texas, you can somewhat understand that we have a lot of students that have English as a second language. But we have significant pockets in Texas where we're behind, where our students are behind where they should be. Good news again here locally though, Collin and Denton, there's some areas that we need to address, but Collin and Denton ISDs, for the most part, actually did quite well. In fact, some of the school districts, their scores actually improved. I think Frisco was one of them. Frisco's scores actually improved during the pandemic. But we have pockets across the state of Texas that are really struggling, and we're going to address that. School safety, I have a slide on school safety. Let's go. So school safety, we've allocated about over $300 million, and then the governor recently put another $100 million. So what we did in the legislature is we formed a bipartisan committee to look at what happened in Uvalde, what are the things that we can do with respect to keeping our children safe. That is our number one priority. I will tell you right now, that is our number one priority, is to keep our kids safe in our schools. We're going to do that. So what we have is we've established a school safety center. We've done a lot of things with respect to dollars and making sure our schools are safe, are physically more secure. There's policies and procedures in place to follow, those types of things. We're looking at legislation next session that says that school districts must have a resource officer on site. Whether that's really feasible or not, I don't know. I will tell you, school districts here locally, if there's not a resource officer at that school, the local law enforcement, like police, the response time is like 3 or 4 minutes. But we're going to be taking a really close look at this and do everything we can to make sure your kids are safe. The other thing that we're doing is we have audits that are going on throughout the state of Texas right now to audit the different schools and how their policies and procedures are being followed and those types of things. So there's a lot more that we're going to be doing on school safety. One of the things that was interesting is, one of the things we're going to take a look at is, do we have too many law enforcement agencies in Texas? So if you look at Uvalde, for example, you literally had Border Patrol, Sheriff, Police, ISD, law enforcement respond to a really chaotic situation, right? And so I think we need to ask ourselves as a state, is it reasonable to think that all these multiple law enforcement units can really work well together in that type of situation? I will tell you, I sat in on a school shooting drill locally with one of the ISDs and actually watched them from afar. And they're having to do a lot of things. They're having to send law enforcement in, establish who's injured, triage them. They can't remove them yet. That comes later, while they're looking for the active shooter. And so to do all those types of things and coordinate with different law enforcement officers or agencies, we're going to be taking a look at that as well. What's the next slide? So this is legislation that we worked on in last session. I won't spend a ton of time on this. One of the things, 4545, that was a good thing and it was a really bad thing that we did. We removed some of the requirements as far as leaning on the STAR test for advancement. But just to be transparent, one of the things that we didn't get right is the the legislature was actually dictating the hours to spend with a student to get them up to speed and all those types of things, and that's really a local decision. It's one of those bills where we probably vote on over 1,000 bills, so when that one reached the floor, it sounded really good, but in practice it wasn't, so we'll be fixing that. We've gotten quite a bit of complaints about that. And then what's the next one? Okay, so this is the last slide. And so start thinking about your questions, and I will give my mic to Melanie, and then we'll start taking questions. So next session, we will work on addressing Robinhood. Again, we probably won't eliminate it, just to be transparent, but I mean, again, I think Austin ISD gives like $500 million. Like I said, Plano ISD gives over $200 million. We need to address that. Replacing the STAR. So we can't get away from standardized testing. So we're going to have to do standardized testing. The federal government actually requires it. And testing's not bad, right? We need to know where our students are, but the STAR test in and of itself has a lot of deficiencies. If you don't believe me, go talk to a teacher, go talk to a principal, and they'll tell you all about it. So we're talking about replacing it with something that can actually provide information for the teacher, like a map test or something along those lines. The STAR test really doesn't provide a teacher with information that they can then use and find out where that child's deficiencies are, where their strengths are, those types of things, where there's other tests, like a map test, that provides teachers with a point in time of how that student's doing in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. The teacher can use that information. So we're looking at trying to replace our standardized testing with something that our teachers can use. Across the economy, we have shortages in everything. We have shortages in doctors, nurses, plumbers, bankers, everything. We have a really bad shortage in teachers. So we're going to look at what are the things that we can do. We established a $2 billion fund that actually can be used for bonuses for teachers. So, our really great excelling teachers that really do an awesome job for our children, let's pay them more. Let's get them 6 figures, right? If they're that good. And so we're doing some things to try to help with addressing the teacher shortage. And one of the things we're looking at is making it easier for veterans to be teachers. We're trying to figure out virtual education. That's like an hour or two discussion. But we're trying to figure out what to do with that. I'm on a commission on virtual education, so we're taking a close look at that. And we're definitely going back to brick and mortar, and we're staying brick and mortar, but there are some things that we can do with virtual education, and so we just have to figure that out. And then next session will be very much a parental rights session. So what are the things that we need to do as far as giving parents more control? One of the things that we're looking at is having portals. So if there's materials in the schools that aren't acceptable to a parent can actually go in the online portal and designate, I don't want this, and next books. And then we're going to hold book vendors accountable as well. We found some pretty disgusting materials in our schools, and so we're going to hold the book vendors accountable if they sell those types of books to our public schools. So a lot to talk about education, both what we've done last session and what we're looking at this session. So with that, Melanie, I'm going to give you my mic, and then if you can, thank you. That'd be good? And again, this isn't the end of the discussion. We're going to do multiple town halls. We typically do multiple before session, and like I said, afterwards. If there's anything here that, actually go to the next slide, we have our email addresses, I think. So if you walk away from here and you have a question, or, you're wasting 2 pictures. If you have a question, or just whatever, reach out to us. We both have 100% meeting policy. If you want to meet with us, we will. And we want to make sure that we're addressing all your concerns and questions. So with that, raise your hand and we'll get to your questions.
the good fight here in Frisco ISD. Last night we all attended a panel with 4 experts that represent Texas 911. And they're looking at the ways that social emotional learning is influencing our children in the schools, removing parents from being the primary family protector of our children to delegating that role to the schools. It is a very insidious Marxist socialist means through which they're trying to take our kids away from the role of the parents. I just want to encourage you guys, first of all, we got to write legislation to get that garbage out of our schools and return our schools to academics only, and work with these folks. It's very hard to understand how the slippery snake is infiltrating our schools. These 4 people that sat on the panel were incredibly impressive. They really wrestled that serpent to the ground and have great legislative ideas for how to get it out of our schools, including an ombudsman that we can report instantaneously these infractions to. I do. I'll give you all their information. It was fantastic, but you guys have your hands full. I encourage you to use experts like that who have been monitoring and investigating this SEL movement. They know how it's working. They know how it's getting in. We want it out of the schools completely. We also need penalties against the ISDs who are continuing to to distribute pornography to our children. There must be financial penalties to the schools. Thank you, that was it. Just work with Texas 911.
So there are some things with that top in the social emotional learning umbrella that it's more, if you have a child that comes from an unstable family environment, right? There's some skills that child hasn't learned, right? And so those types of things we will continue to do, but certainly we're going to be very sensitive to any type of abuses, all those types of things. Normally what we try to do is either have opt-in, opt-out provisions, but we are certainly not going to ever, in Texas at least, remove the parent's role in education.
Yeah, just to address that too, Representative Shaheen's slide about next session, that's in no way an exhaustive list of everything that we're going to try to tackle next session. That's just kind of hitting some of the highlights. I think Representative Shaheen and I both have significant concerns about parental rights in our schools, but I also think that we have to recognize that not every child comes from a home with either parents or involved parents in the school, and so that's a very difficult challenge to tackle. When you have these empty vessels come into our schools that may not have a loving family at home, and so there is something that has to be done about that. But I can tell you that we are committed to improving or better acknowledging the fact that parents are at the top of the pyramid when it comes to the involvement in the child's education. And I agree with you. We have got to hold school districts accountable. We've got to hold both vendors accountable. There are materials that are in our public schools that if anyone else in society handed that to a child, they would be arrested. But because there is this exception in the law as of today, our schools can hide behind that. And so that is something that we are committed to doing next session, which is removing that obscenity exemption so that we can start holding people accountable that are sharing explicit and obscene materials. And that's not just a word that we throw around lightly. I mean, that is a defined term in code, in the penal code, obscenity. It is defined, and we know what it is. There's a lot of books that we've had to fight to get it removed. Some districts more than others. But we're absolutely committed to that next session.
Thank you for coming today. I just wanted to praise the Frisco ISD because I think they did a good job with making their process of vetting books transparent. Like, you can find all the information online. They let you know what books were reviewed. So I think that's they've done a great job. Mr. Patterson, I have a question for you. I'm wondering, as a Republican who supposedly wants small government, that is the platform of the GOP, why our government feels they need to be involved with school libraries. I would think that's why we have our school board, our PTA, our school administrators, our teachers, and our parents. So I'm not understanding why the Texas legislature feels like it needs to be involved. My other question is, we do know that there is a word for obscenity and a definition in the penal code, only that it's been changed because of pressure from some parents in the district. So we're actually not using the legal definition of obscenity to review books. My other question is, why do we give teachers, why do we make them get degrees? Why do we make librarians get degrees? And yet parents who might have no specialty, no training, get to decide? No, and it's serious, because we all have the choice to take our kids out of school. If we don't like what they're doing, we can just teach them at home, right? Freedom.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. First and foremost, the parents are absolutely always in control. They're the ones that elect the school board. The school board should represent them. Unfortunately, they don't in all cases. But I will tell you that it's the legislature's duty, because the legislature created the school districts, just like the legislature created the cities and the counties. It is ultimately our responsibility when a government entity that we created as a state, just like we created the federal government, it is our responsibility as a state to rein them in whenever they're not doing what's in the best interest of the community. Now, to tell you about the librarians, you're absolutely right. I did not start this journey blaming the librarians or the teachers. I started this journey blaming the book vendors, trying to get the book vendors held accountable, because here's the reality of the situation. Fast growth districts like Frisco, Prosper, or Aubrey, or any, Plano at the time, they are building so many new schools at a time. And so what they're doing is that they contract with a book vendor, and they say, we need 12,000 books, or we need 15,000 books, or we need 10,000 books. And the book vendor says, I'll give you one more. Not only will I sell you those books, I'll also come to your library, stock the shelves, set up all the displays, and when your librarian walks in on day one, he or she has a fully stocked library. Now, the librarian doesn't know what's in the library. Let's be honest about that. There is no librarian out there that could possibly read and have a good understanding of every single book that's in their library. The standards didn't change. School districts said, I want highly rated books, I want award-winning books, and those are the books that the book vendors gave them. The problem is that when the adults were in charge, highly rated books and award-winning books weren't filled with graphic sexual acts, both illustrated and in the written word. And so that's unfortunately what has crept into the system. That's why at the very beginning of this, I started pushing back, and Representative Shaheen and I met with multiple book vendors. We had one called Permabel, that's a family-owned book vendor. They came into our office hat in hand. They had no idea some of the books that were in their own catalog that they were supplying to school districts. They pulled 40 books out of their national catalog that were either sexually explicit or just plainly inappropriate for children. Then we met with a book vendor called Follett, and it didn't go well. I mean, we read from one of the books, and they basically said, we will sell that book. We agree that it's egregious, but we will sell that book, and we will do it until you legislatively force us not to do it. And so it's a really bad issue whenever there are adults that think that it is appropriate for this type of obscene material to be in front of children. And I'll give you one example. I have filed 28 formal challenges with Frisco Independent School District. And of those, only 5 were rejected at face value. Now, these weren't just random books that I pulled out. These are books that have been pulled by Prosper Independent School District, Little Elm Independent School District, or Permabel for being inappropriate. Only 5 were pulled out of 28. Then we had to go through we went through the whole reconsideration process and all that. Then I had to file appeals. And according to FISD's own policy, they pulled all but 7 of the 28 books. And we're getting ready to file appeals for those 7 that will go to the school board. And they're gonna be forced to take a vote on every single one of those books to see if they determine that it's appropriate. Now, they may not agree with me, but that's their prerogative. But I'm going through the process. Now, I've gotten some grief about my tactics on this issue over the last year. But you'll notice that I haven't used those tactics in Little Elm, or Aubrey, or Pilot Point, or Sanger, or Louisville Independent School District, or Denton Independent School District, the other school districts that I represent. And it's because I've gotten the most resistance on this issue from only one school district, not the others. And that's why we've had to push so hard to get to the point that we are now. I have no doubt that if all the parents and teachers who are providing me with information, who are providing me with support behind the scenes, had they not pushed as hard as they had, and had I not used what I had available to me as my resources, as a public figure in the community, that we wouldn't be where we are today.
We'll stick around afterwards, but we want to try to get as many questions. So,
Thanks for being here, y'all. My name's Jake Peters. I admire what you're doing. I have 8 and 9-year-old girls. I don't want sexually explicit nonsense in any of my libraries. Fortunately, they're in elementary school. I don't think that's been much of an issue. But my biggest issue is Frisco ISD is kind of the backbone of our community. It has been for years and years and years. We have an exceptional, one of the highest rated school districts in the state. A 2-part question. I'm concerned that your tactics that you just mentioned, although I admire the progress that you're making, and I think it is righteous, I think your tactics are a bit extreme to where it is damaging our backbone of our community. Is there an opportunity to, I think there was a little bit more opportunity if you didn't take such a broad approach and try and force this some sort of issue to sign, for everyone to sign. Is there a way for you to back off a little bit in order to help preserve our community? And second, you say a lot of terrible things about Frisco ISD online and other places. Can you name 3 things that are good about Frisco ISD?
yeah, I will tell you, we have a lot of meetings with, if we're going to talk about Frisco ISD, we've had meetings with all of our school districts. We have specific meetings with Frisco ISD. We've met the superintendent multiple times, the trustees multiple times. We actually had a meeting last week. I will often just pick up the phone and talk with the superintendent or his staff. So just the response, it seems like, I can tell you my perspective, this has been pretty much fixed in the other school district. There's just something at Frisco, I don't know what. We're not going to do any, we love our Frisco ISD, we love the teachers, we're going to always support them. I mean, we changed, Representative Patterson and I on the floor last session were on the phone with the government relations person, changing a bill on the fly, on the floor to make sure that Frisco was being served as best as we could. We're going to continue to do that.
Matt, with all due respect, that was more for Jared.
Yeah, so I'll take that question. Yeah, I mean, I have used some different tactics on this issue than I've used before, and I think it's kind of hard to argue with the success. I mean, we have had to quite frankly, there's a number of people in the community that whatever the district says, whatever it is, it doesn't even matter. It's taken as the gospel. And unfortunately, this all came up because of an original letter from the superintendent downplaying the book issue, saying that it was about one dusty book in the back corner of the library. And, then we proved that there was a bookcase on Reedy High School that was on the main hallway with a bunch of explicit books in it. At every turn, the district has made public remarks that are just simply not true. And you can not like the messenger, but you can't point to anything that I've said that's been incorrect. You just can't. The explicit books could have been pulled immediately. On day one, those books came in full. All it took was some leadership. And there just wasn't any on this topic. Now, what I'll say about it, all three of my kids go to Frisco Independent School District schools. If I didn't care so much about Frisco, I wouldn't be fighting to change it away from having these types of materials in school and away from the culture within the administration that finds this type of thing acceptable. I wouldn't be fighting to change it. What I'll tell you is that in many of my posts, what I'm sure was skipped over was how I've highlighted the elementary school that my kids go to. The wonderful teachers there, the wonderful principal, the wonderful experience, this awesome cocoon that my kids have been in at the elementary school level. But you know, my oldest is now in middle school. You know, I'm very, very concerned about high school, and I'm going to continue to push until this crap is removed. There is a culture of that are afraid to speak out, and I will tell you this: I'm not coming up with all this on my own. I have parents and teachers that come to me with this information. I have teachers that are afraid to speak out internally. I have parents who maybe their daughter is on the National Honor Society, and maybe the librarian is the one that is in charge of that, or maybe another teacher, and they're afraid to speak out because it is so stinking competitive to get into college, and they don't want any repercussions to their kids. And so I'm fighting for all of those people who may not be the Facebook warriors on all the chat groups, but they are real people. They're taxpayers, and they have every right to be concerned about the culture.
Let's give everybody a chance. Let's move on, and we'll stick around if you want to do one-on-one.
Hi, Candy here, hi. Just real fast, since you brought this up, I was a prodigy in opera at 13, and by 19 I was told I was one of the top 4 greatest sopranos in the world that did a Mozart role from Salzburg, Austria. And because of this, I wasn't going to ask this, but because of the sexual harassment that we received in show business, my sister did the famous movie Colorblind. If you're in education, you would know about it. We had to leave show business as teenagers, and I'll be 70 next year. You helped me because I didn't realize just how much we were picked on sexually. Thank you for what you're doing. I have healed a lot from the sexual harassment, and it's in the schools. The grooming we got in New York and LA and show business and across the US as we tried to perform, and instead of singing 12 hours a day and people are trying to grab your breasts or your private parts was really disturbing. So thank you. My question is, I'm a trained word clearer, and Jared and I have worked on this already. This young lady in the front row who said people have degrees so they know everything. This is the problem with America. Who do I talk to? Because I'm a newer Texan now. I'm a trained word clearer. 40 years ago, people sat with me and found all my misunderstood words, the small words, the words that no one cleared in school. And Jared and I went over this, and you can have a degree, but do you know what all these different words mean? School is not teaching us. Who is in charge of the basic foundational technology that goes into our school system? Because when I left show business, I went pre-med at UCLA for 4 years. The communist Chinese knew all the calculus, all the everything, all the basics at UCLA, and I hear our Americans going, how come they're getting all the A's in calculus and we're trying to get to medical
Your
school?
question about who's there.
Yeah, so that's my question. America is way down on their technology and foundational information.
Yeah,
Degrees don't mean anything today.
Is there a question? We're taking a look at
Yes,
that
my
right now.
question is, who do we go to present technologies that are missing from the American school system? Because that's what's wrong.
I would first go to your school board and then your state legislators after
But
that.
is there a group, Matt, that?
No, not, I mean, I'm on a commission on virtual education where we're taking a look at it broadly, but any type of initial inquiry on schools, you should go to your school board representative because they're at the local level. And then, you know, if you're not getting what you need there, then go ahead to your state level.
Thank you.
And let's, well, I mean, I'm hearing some really great speeches, but let's get to the questions.
All right, so I have just one statement and I have a question post that. So the statement is that my son is in middle school and we've had some of those books in school. So he identified them, read them to me when he came home, took a picture of them. So I don't think that's cool, and I come from India, a different culture. To kind of see what's, so there are certain things that you teach your kids at home, and there are certain things that I pay for as taxes that We want our kids to learn over here. So that's extremely important to me. I have pictures of that and that he's actually shown me. My question to you is that when we do something incorrectly at work or any form of life, there's some accountability, right? So what is the accountability that you guys are sitting here for the people that get those books from wherever they are? We put them on the shelves where our kids go there and see it. And my kid's not ready enough right now. He's still mature to be able to understand what are those things. What is someone doing to someone else? Whether it's it's man and woman, man and man, or whatever it is, right? And what is the accountability is my question, that you're going to hold these people? What are the standards you're going to hold them to?
That's a really good question. Let me assure you, we are going to fix this. This is totally unacceptable, and we're fixing this. We'll fix it legislatively. Again, we have, Representative Patterson talked about legislation that if a book vendor sells this trash into our schools, they will be banned from doing business in the state of Texas. We're removing the obscenity exemption, because right now you can take a pornographic book, take it off school property and get arrested, but if it's on school property, you can't. But I will tell you, so we're gonna handle this legislation. This is not, in my mind, this is not a debatable topic. I will be transparent with everybody. When I first heard about this, I really struggled to believe that this was really in our schools. And then I had a parent, I had a PTA town hall like this, and one of the moms did this to me in the back of the room, and she showed me one of these awful, disgusting books. And I cannot tell you how ticked off I was because my daughters went to that school where that library was. So I think some of the struggle is some of this is just so bad. Like if I was to read to you some of the pages, the sentences out of these books, you would be horrified. The images, we're talking about underage little boys performing sex acts on each other. We're talking about graphic illustrations of women being raped by demons in our schools. So we're going to take care of this legislatively. The other accountability section is the elections. You can hold us accountable, you can hold your school board accountable. You all have to say.
Thank you, both of you, for holding this. Quick question. I grew up here in Texas, lived in Dallas, grew up in Dallas, and ever since 1980, the U.S. Department of Education was created, as well as gun-free zones in 1989. I experienced the negative effects of both of those, one bill and the other one, the department. 1985, the school in my neighborhood in Dallas was a highly rated school. By the time in 1990, I got stabbed there the first week, and I had to have my grandmother move to W.T. White District in order for me to not be in a situation where I was basically bullied and stabbed. Now that being said, when are we going to allow our children to have a voucher in Frisco to be able to choose their school? If people want to send their children to a school with a librarian that is disgusting, that's their choice. But I want our kids to have a value and send those kids to the schools that are performing correctly. We should have a choice. Our children should have a choice. What do you think about making school choice, as well as even when it comes to gun-free zones, have schools that are actually safe? In 1989, that's when gun-free zones happened. 1991 was Columbine. It didn't work. Neither did the Department of Education. What are we going to fix the problems that have caused this?
Thank you for those questions. So, we have like maybe 20 minutes left. Let's try to get some questions on this out of the room too. So to answer your question specifically, school districts have the ability currently to have a school marshal program or a school guardian program to have trained and armed people on every single campus. It's just whether they choose to participate in that or not. I have a couple of school districts that are in my house district that have chosen to have armed security guards through the school marshal or school guardian program, and and they have signs out in front of each school, and they say, "We are armed, and we will do whatever it takes to protect our children." And I think that in this day and age, every school district should do that. There are so many threats and we could get into it, there are so many threats against our children, both from physical harm, like what we saw in Uvalde, and mental and emotional harm, like what we're seeing in some of these explicit materials. In terms of vouchers, that's a tough one, right? Because there's not a specific dollar amount that you could say every child is X number of dollars. Okay, like Arizona passed this program where they said, and I forget the dollar amount, but let's say that it's $7,000 or whatever. $7,000 per student. Well, that's not appropriate for every single student. If you have a special education student, or if you have both of my boys are dyslexic, there is a different dollar amount above the head of every single child. The school district receives a certain amount of money for different children based on their needs. And so it can't be a set dollar amount, but I absolutely support parental, I absolutely support parental choice, and I absolutely support dollars following the children to the school of the choice of their parents. And so we should empower parents. There is no system that is better off with a lack of competition. There is no system that has ever been in place that is better. The fact that we have teachers leaving in droves, and this is not a new problem. This is a long-standing problem of teachers leaving in droves from the public education system. And if I'm a hardworking teacher and I'm busting my tail to do a great job and to improve scores and all this, yet I get the same 3% raise that the teacher next door gets who doesn't do near the job that I do, that's a problem. There are districts in Texas, including Dallas, that are paying some teachers 6 figures because of the job that they're doing. But we get fought for the teachers' unions down in Austin, and groups like TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, who fight against these policies to get better teachers, better pay. And so if you had a more competitive system, then teachers would be able to choose the school district that pays them the most. And instead of just a little bit here and there,
Good morning. I want to make a comment about the social emotional learning. And there are kids that come from families that, really are extended families. But what happens is when you have a school district who are teaching kids that don't have the same moral basis, you don't know what those kids are going to be teaching. So I want to make a comment. But second of all, is there any way we could do something with the money that is recaptured by the state in order to pay our teachers more? And the second thing is, right now we're under Title IX, for instance. There are going to be some things that are put on the districts because of Title IX and redoing it. Is there any way that we can get some of the money that we would lose from the federal government if we could raise those taxes or raise that money in our own districts and just not be under Title IX?
I think there's an option to be under Title IX. I think that's federal statutes. You're talking about as far as fairness in sports, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
restrooms and all that.
yeah, my favorite topic. We work on. I've been filing legislation to address this whole scenario where allowing a male to go into a female locker room or shower facility. I don't believe we have to file legislation like that, but that's something that we're constantly working on. I will tell you that the federal government's been trying to mandate stuff that actually is harmful to women and women in sports, by the way. But I've talked to the Attorney General. There's several states that are suing the Biden administration. I'm actually meeting with the Attorney General again next Tuesday about this topic and others. So I think that's the avenue. And then as far as freeing up dollars for teacher salaries, we're trying to do that every session. And so there's the Robin Hood piece that needs to be addressed. And some of this can really be fixed by just putting more state dollars into education. You saw that graph where we're consistently increase the state funding and other sources for education. The problem is your appraisals are going through the roof, which I know you're painfully aware of, and we're going to try to do some property tax relief this session
we're trying to do that every session.
So thank y'all for being here and doing this. So we know that early intervention for kiddos is one of the very best predictors of their success in any type of school setting, whether it's public, private, charter schools. Do you all have any sort of ideas about how we can fully fund pre-K? In Frisco ISD, we have over 1,200 pre-K kiddos. We're not a fully funded, it's not a fully funded mechanism, so it's expensive for us to continue to offer pre-K, but we know it's the most important thing for us to do as a district to get kids on the right path. Do you have any thoughts on, I don't know if that's an HB3 reform or something that we can do to fully fund that model for our kiddos?
That's a good question. You know, we took a step in that direction in 2019, and I fully support fully funding pre-K, just so that you know. And here's why. My mom taught first grade for 38 years in public schools, up in White Springs in the school district. And for 38 years taught first grade. A lot of what she taught in first grade for 38 years is now taught in kindergarten. And we are starting some of these concepts earlier and earlier and earlier in life. And so, you know, education has to evolve along with everything else. And so a lot of these kids, you know, I think there's a misconception that in kindergarten, people are learning their colors and their shapes. And, you know, what they don't realize is that a lot of kids are learning to read and basic fundamentals of math in kindergarten. And so we really need to back that up. If I were in charge of the entire system, kids probably wouldn't do anything except read for the first 3 years of school. Reading only for the first 3 years, and then get into everything else. Now, you know, like King Jared, you elect one of 150 and one half of the Texas legislature. So, you know, I can't really put that through. But I think the best thing that we could possibly do is focus only on reading for the first 3 years of school, because then you learn by reading after that. And so, to answer your question specifically, I fully support pre-K. I think that it's important. I think it's vital to the competition in the whole community, and hopefully we can get there soon.
First, as someone who has been out knocking doors for both of you, I want to say thank you very much, because it makes me feel like what I put in, the sweat, the tears, and all the miles, was well worth it. So thank you both, and thank you, Jared, for not coddling people's feelings and doing what needs to be done, and taking the stance that you have to get these books out of our schools. Thank you. Secondly, my question actually is, would you both be willing to take a look at something that's happened in another district where they pulled funds out of the criminal drug bust and put that money, after the case has been through the court systems, to bring that and put that in as funding to help take care of what we need to take care of at home?
I don't think I
So-
asset forfeiture, or?
There's an area where I come from, because I've only been in Texas for 4 years, where I was part of the law enforcement team in that area. After people have been arrested, you know, they do all these confiscations. We've had several posts from Frisco PD where they've confiscated, you know, the drugs, the money, and all that. The money that is confiscated after the initial case and everything has been settled in court, this particular district has been able to do whatever needs to be done to filter that money into a good cause. Are you guys willing to take a look at that?
Yeah, I mean, that's somewhat already, so that's civil asset forfeiture. So that is when you, if you are caught and convicted of carrying out a crime, law enforcement actually has the ability to acquire your assets in the use of the crime. And then what they are allowed to do is take those dollars. Say you were running drugs that you were doing with a vehicle. The sheriff's department, police department could take your vehicle, sell it, and then they can use those dollars for their budget. So like bulletproof vests, all those types of things. So yeah, I mean, we can look at the flexibility as far as how to use those dollars. I will tell you there's some concern about civil asset forfeiture. There's actually been some abuses, so we're going to need to take a look at that as well. There's been some individuals that they've had their assets confiscated and the trial was not for a year and a half, right? So there's some things around civil asset forfeiture that we need to fix. But we certainly can look at the deployment of those dollars for sure.
Thank you. As a seventh generation Texan, it's really incredible to hear so many newbies around here, so welcome y'all. I appreciate y'all being here and listen to all of us. I have a two-part question. I know I only get the microphone once, so part of it's on STAR, and then the other part of it is on teacher retention. So STAR right now, it's an end-of-the-year assessment, and I know that you're talking about this being one of your priorities as some sort of re-envisioning of it. And I know right now we have the assessment at the end, and then we get the results over the summer, typically, and then the teacher the next year can use it. The issue with that, as you would understand probably, is that the next teacher is not covering those topics. Those TEKs are old TEKs, and yes, we have to work on that stuff still, but we're moving on. I'm also a former educator. So I'm wondering, what's your vision? Is there some sort of, is it benchmarks? Is there another standardized test that you're thinking of working off of, some sort of level of standard? Okay, that's one, that's STAR. The other is, again, as a former educator, there's a clear gap between the number of educators, or the number of individuals who are entering the profession, and the number of educators we need. We have so many people moving to Texas, again, welcome. And we need to figure out how to fill these gaps. Veterans, fantastic, but that's so small. And we need to retain the teachers we have. And in Frisco ISD, I know that Frisco ISD has a teacher incentive allotment that they are putting in place, which is how teachers in other districts are making $100K or whatever. But we're doing that here, and it's just not enough yet. And I mean, we can go on property taxes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's hard to even live here in the city. But anyways, my question is, what's your plan to close this gap, and how do we retain these teachers?
On the testing, yeah, the vision there, you laid out STAR perfectly. I go around and try to visit all the schools in my district, and I heard exactly what you said from teachers over and over again. They almost have to shut down the school. They have to teach to the test, and once the students take the test, then they have to teach them the real way to do things. I mean, STAR is just disruptive. It's not only is the information not very useful to our teachers, but it's pretty disruptive. So the vision is you do these smaller, shorter period tests throughout the year, right? It's not this big, huge production that STAR is. It's an hour or so assessments in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. And they're also, we're envisioning testing that's more adaptive in nature. So in other words, what that means is the STAR test, if you're headed down and you're answering all these questions, it's linear. The questions aren't going to change. So if you're not understanding a topic early in the questions that you're answering, you're just going to go off a cliff because you're going to get the rest of them wrong. There's other testing it's called adaptive, and it'll adapt the questions based on how well you're doing previously. And what that does is that gives information to the teacher as far as not only where is this child struggling, what levels, right, so that they can actually pinpoint specific pockets to focus on for that child because of that adaptive nature in the test. And to your point, it's not this year-end test that nobody uses the data next year except for the state and the federal government. So we want to arm the teachers with that, those assessments throughout the school year. And again, these aren't these disruptive, shut the school down, STAR type things. These are, 2-hour tests that they can figure out, how that child is